Joshua. The story. Following the death of Moses on Mount Nebo, God spoke to Moses' replacement, the man who would lead the Israelites into the Promised Land, Joshua, the son of Nun. God officially anointed Joshua as Moses' replacement and commanded him to lead his people, the Israelites, into the lands he promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses from the burning bush. God also warned Joshua not to stray from the laws and commandments he gave Moses at Mount Sinai, and forbade the Israelite people from doing the same. After Joshua relayed God's words to the people, Joshua's first act as leader was to send spies into the land of Jericho, the first step in Israel's conquest, who returned with a good report, and Joshua knew God would give their land to his people. Early the next morning, Joshua and the Israelites moved from Shittim to closer to the Jordan River, camping on the part that faced Jericho, where they stayed for 3 days. After this, Joshua and the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant travelled in front of the rest of the Israelites, who followed at a distance of about 900 meters, and purified themselves for the trip. The priests carrying the Ark stood in the middle of the river, which had split into two, as the Red Sea did with Moses. The Ark stayed in the centre until all the Israelites crossed. Only then did they join them on the other side. After crossing the Jordan River, Joshua and the Israelites travelled to Gilgal. Yet before the priests and Ark left the Jordan River, Joshua, through God, commanded one man from each of the 12 tribes of Israel to take 1 stone each from the river and place said stone in their camp. After they did, Joshua entered the Jordan and placed 12 stones where the priests with the Ark stood. In Gilgal, Joshua reassembled the structure made from the 12 stones the Israelites retrieved from the Jordan. The Israelite people were circumcised, as the people born during the wilderness wanderings hadn't been yet. So the process was completed on a hill named Gibeonites, the hill of the foreskins. And Joshua and the Israelites observed the Passover feast, since their stay in Gilgal fell during the dates set by God. Joshua and the Israelites arrived at their first location in their conquest of the Promised Land, Jericho. God commanded Joshua not to lead the Israelites into the city, but to march around the city walls once a day with all the battle-ready men, the Ark of the Covenant, and 7 priests, each with a trumpet made from a ram's horn, in that order for 6 days. On the 7th day, everyone will march around the city wall 7 times. On the 7th round, the priests will blow their trumpets long and loud. The people will shout as loud as the trumpets, and the walls will fall. Joshua and the Israelites obeyed God's instructions and ransacked the city of Jericho, killing and looting all its inhabitants, livestock and possessions, leaving only Rahab, her family and possessions untouched, because she hid the Israelite spies. The Israelites saved anything made from gold, silver, bronze and iron, storing it in the tabernacle as it was reserved for God, after which they then burnt the city down. And Joshua, the Israelites, and the invasion became widely known throughout the nations. Following their success in Jericho, Joshua and the Israelites moved to Ai. However, unlike before, the Israelites and Joshua fell into the hands of the Amorites, the people living in Ai, losing 36 of the 3,000 sent. Joshua and the elders bowed before the Ark of the Covenant, and Joshua begged God to reveal why this defeat occurred. God revealed that Israel had sinned and stolen some of the Jericho spoil reserved for God. He told Joshua to cleanse the people and find those responsible for the theft. The Israelites complied with God's words, and after some investigating, they settled on the tribe of Judah. From there they settled on the Gibeonites. From there they settled on a man named Zabdi, and from there the Israelites settled on a man named Achan, son of Carmi. Joshua interrogated Achan about the theft. Achan admitted to the crime and informed him what he took and where to find it, claiming he took a mantle from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, and buried them underneath his tent. Joshua sent some messengers to find if Achan's claims were true. The messengers returned with the items, after which Achan, the items, his family, and all his livestock were taken to the valley of Achor, where the Israelites stoned them to death and burnt their remains on God's command. Then they piled a heap of stones on them. This act of justice satisfied God, and when Joshua and the Israelites attacked Ai for the 2nd time, they succeeded and conquered Ai and Bethel just like Jericho. After their victory, Joshua built an altar to God, thanked him for his help, and re-established the covenant first given through Moses. After Jericho and Ai, the Israelites' next target was Gibeon. The people of the land, the Gibeonites, had heard of Israel and fearing them, decided to try and deceive them, pretending to be helpless and weak wanderers from a faraway land, wearing tattered and torn clothes, carrying old stale bread and empty wineskins when they visited the Israelites' camp, asking for an alliance. However, 3 days later it was discovered that these innocent strangers were the people of the land surrounding the Israelites' camp, the people of Gibeon, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath-Jearim. Yet despite their deception, the Israelites did not kill them, due to Joshua's covenant of peace. But Joshua cursed the people of the four lands and their descendants to become the slaves of the Israelites because of their actions. Adoni-Zedek, the king of Jerusalem, became aware of Israel's victories over Jericho and Ai, but what worried him the most was that the great nation of Gibeon had bowed before this unknown race of people. Adoni-Zedek informed Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, about the Israelite people and their achievements in the Gibeonites' peace treaty. Adoni-Zedek and the other four kings were offended by the Gibeonites' treaty with the Israelites and decided to destroy the city and its people. The men of Gibeon begged Joshua and the Israelites to help them defeat the 5 kings and their armies, which they did, and during the battle Joshua asked God to keep the sun shining in the sky until their enemies were defeated. Joshua, the Israelites, and the Gibeonites defeated the men of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. Yet the kings of the 5 nations, Adoni-Zedek, Hoham, Piram, Japhia, and Debir, fled and hid in a cave named Makkedah. Joshua and his men imprisoned the kings by rolling a large stone over the cave's opening and declared the Israelites' next moves. Before conquering the nations ruled by these 5 kings, Joshua orders the prisoners be brought before him. The Israelite war chiefs rest their feet on each king's neck, a symbol of encouragement for the victories God was about to give them. Then returned the 5 to the cave, sealed it, and placed guards outside it. Afterward, Joshua and the Israelites conquered 4 of the 5 lands belonging to the kings, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, as well as the land where the cave was located, Makkedah. Joshua and the Israelites also conquered Gezer, Debir, Gedar, Hormah, Arad, Libnah, Adullam, Bethel, Tappuah, Hepher, Aphek, Lasharon, Madon, Hazor, Shimron, Meron, Achashaph, Taanach, Megiddo, Kedesh, Jokneam, and Carmel, Dor, Gilgal, and Terah. Due to Joshua's age, the Israelites couldn't claim all the land God promised, leaving Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod semi-occupied, all regions of the Philistines and Geshurites, Ekron, Ashkelon, Arah, Aphek, Bebalos, and all of eastern Lebanon from Baal-Gad to Lebo-Hamath. God promised Joshua he personally would conquer the land belonging to the Gibeonites, Lebanon to Misaphoth-Maim, which would be divided between all tribes except for Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, who received their inheritance before the Israelites crossed the Jordan. After this, the land taken following the Israelites crossing the Jordan River was divided up into 10 even sections for the tribes of Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Issachar, Judah, Naphtali, Simeon, and Zebulun, the half-tribe of Ephraim, and the other half of the half-tribe of Manasseh. Even Caleb, son of Jephunneh, from the tribe of Judah, a faithful and loyal spy and follower of God, was given the city of Hebron as an inheritance. The tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the other half of Manasseh received their inheritance from Moses before the Israelites crossed the Jordan. The tribe of Levi, the Levites, received no land inheritance from Israel's inheritance, apart from 48 towns to settle in and their pasture lands. A long time since the Israelites' conquest of the Promised Land and dividing it among the people, Joshua was now very old, and like Moses, Joshua wanted to address the people of Israel before he passed on. He assembled the Israelites, including their elders, leaders, judges, and officials, recalling to them their story from crossing the Jordan up to that point. He also commanded them to remain faithful to God and remember the laws he gave through Moses, warning them of the repercussions that may occur if they don't, just like Moses. Joshua also re-established the covenant with Israel's leaders, the covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, just like their previous leader Moses did. This generation of Israel agreed like the generation before, and like Moses, Joshua prophesied that they wouldn't, despite them insisting they would. After his address, Joshua died aged 110. He was buried in the hill country of Ephraim at a place called Timnath Sherah, or Timnath Heres, part of his tribe's inheritance. When the Israelites had fully settled in their new homes, they buried the bones of Joseph, which had been brought from Egypt when they first started their journey, in the piece of land that Jacob bought at Shechem, fulfilling the request Joseph made many centuries before. Digging deeper. We'll spend this section digging more deeply into the inheritance of the Israelites at the time of Joshua. The tribe of Reuben, Gad, and one half of Manasseh settles on the east side of the Jordan River, and their territory stretched from Jahaz at the bottom of Reuben's plot to the great region of Bashan in Manasseh's plot. Each of the three tribes' territory directly borders the Jordan River, with Reuben, the only tribe of the three, having direct access to the Dead Sea. Reuben's district also has a river flowing out from the Dead Sea that travels along its bottom border, which forks in two places. The first runs up and passes the town of Jahaz. The second runs along Reuben's west border. The regions of Gad and Manasseh are separated by a river that flows from the Jordan and stops just before the end of Manasseh's southern border. Another river flows from the Jordan and travels along the north border of Manasseh, then dips down, then up and ends at Manasseh's northern tip. This river forks in two places. The first travels up and through Bashan, the second travels down and passes Edrei. Reuben's territory also included Mount Neob, the same mountain Moses died on. The rest of the tribes settle west of the Jordan, including the other half of the tribe of Manasseh. The regions of Benjamin, Issachar, Judah, Manasseh, and Naphtali have direct access to the Jordan. The territories of Asher, Dan, and Manasseh have direct access to the Mediterranean Sea, and Ephraim, Zebulun, and Simeon are all landlocked. The tribe of Judah is the only district on the west who has direct access to the Dead Sea, with their chunks stretching almost the length of the west side of the sea. Naphtali's inheritance contains the Sea of Galilee, a small lake that splits the Jordan like the Sea of Galilee, and the remainder of the Jordan. A small river flows from the small lake up to just about the town of Ijon. One final small river flows out the Jordan to the east, ending in unclaimed land, with a smaller river flowing out this offshoot, finishing in the city of Dan. The first river, flowing from the Mediterranean Sea, flows into the unclaimed Elamite/Philistine region and the lower half of Judah, ending in the lower part of the wilderness of Zin, part of Judah, cutting from the lower corner of Simeon's claim. The second flows along Dan's and a little bit of Ephraim's border with Manasseh, and forks in the middle. This offshoot flows down and stops in Ephraim. A third small river flows from the Mediterranean along the border of Asher and Manasseh, stopping at the corner of Zebulun's border with the two. The final river flows into Israel, starting just above Tyre in Asher and continues into Naphtali, turns and continues up, passing by Ijon before exiting into unclaimed territory. During the division of the Promised Land, the tribe of Levi was separated into four clans: the Aaronites, the Gershonites, the Cophenites, and the Merarites. They received no inheritance in the Promised Land, instead receiving the exclusivity of God's priesthood. Yet God did give the Levites 48 cities and their pasture lands from the other tribes' territories, 13 for the Aaronites, 13 for the Gershonites, 10 for the Cophronites, and 12 for the Merarites. Asher provided 4 cities, all for the Gershonites. Benjamin provided 4 cities, all for the Aaronites. Dan provided 4 cities, all for the Cophronites. Ephraim provided 4 cities, all for the Cophronites. Gad provided 4 cities, all for the Meratonites. Issachar provided 4 cities, all for the Gershonites. Judah provided 9 cities, all for the Aaronites. Manasseh provided 4 cities, 2 for the Gershonites, and 2 for the Cophronites. Naphtali provided 3 cities, all for the Gershonites. Reuben provided 4 cities, all for the Meratonites. Simeon provided none, sharing with Judah. And Zebulun provided 4 cities, all for the Meratonites. To finish, God commanded that 6 cities, Bezer, Golan, Hebron, Kadesh in Galilee, Ramoth Gilead, and Shechem would be cities of refuge. Bezer, Golan, and Ramoth Gilead are east of the Jordan River. Hebron, Kadesh in Galilee, and Shechem are west of the Jordan. All 6 cities were part of the Levites' 48. The cities of refuge were used for those, Israelite and non-Israelite, who committed accidental manslaughter, not murder, to hide from the victim's family before they could stand trial for their supposed crime. Before he or she could stay in the city, they had to explain their story to the city elders, after which the elders would find them a place to stay. If the victim's family arrives at the city, the elders are to hide the perpetrator from them. If the perpetrator was acquitted, he or she could remain in the city until the high priest who presided over their trial died. Then they had to return to where they originated, or they could return home immediately after being acquitted. What to learn? What should we take away from the story of Joshua and the Israelites' conquest of the Promised Land? We'll start with the Gibeonites' deception toward Israel. This story teaches us the importance of honesty, not seen in the Gibeonite people, who lied to Joshua and the Israelites, claiming to be poor wanderers from a distant land, when in fact they weren't. The Israelites didn't kill the people for their lies, but did condemn them and their descendants to become the Israelites' slaves when they established themselves in their new land. This shows us that we must be honest in everything we do, because not doing so could lead to negative consequences for us and or others. Another is the story of the 5 kings. The kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon became angry about their neighbours, the Gibeonites' peace treaty with Israel, another consequence of Gibeon's deception, and attempted to invade their land. Joshua and the Israelites helped them foil the king's plot and trapped them in a cave when they fled from their defeat. This story teaches us that we should always leave justice for the wrongs we suffer to God. God loves justice. He will bring it in this age or the age to come. But we must leave the timing in God's hands, something the kings of the 5 nations did not. In turn, like the Gibeonites, suffered consequences as they didn't give this task to God. Lastly, the main narrative, Joshua and the Israelites' conquest of the Promised Land, explores faithfulness and obedience to God. Throughout Joshua and the Israelites' conquest of the Promised Land, they stayed, except for Achan and Ai, faithful to God and fulfilled all commands he gave to Joshua and all the laws given through Moses. God rewarded their loyalty by giving them the majority of the land he promised, leaving the remainder for another Israelite who continued the same attitude. How does this apply to us today? Like the 5 kings, we too will have times when we want revenge. Like the Gibeonites, we too will be fearful about some form of threat. And like Joshua and the Israelites, we too will have tasks and missions God gives us to achieve. But unlike the 5 kings and the Gibeonites, we must put our trust and faith in God to bring justice and protection. We should look to Joshua, a man loyal and faithful to God, a man who knew God was with him and able to protect him and his people, ready to bring justice to him and his people. and would bring to perfection what he promised to him and his people.